Welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom, and we are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. We have a lot to cover this morning. As always, I'm going to put my contact information up there for you to contact me, reach out to me. We do not have a guest. It's just you and me together this morning, and I look forward to it because we have so much to catch up on. But on tomorrow's program, and that's why I put my contact information up, you can contact me there if you have any questions for Senator Tom O'Mara. Tom O'Mara is going to be our guest on tomorrow's program. We have a great lineup all week. We'll get to that a little bit later on. But before we take our first break, I wanted to mention this on Friday. Just ran out of time. I'm not sure what this says. It's just something to keep in mind. We brought up the poll time and time again that shows that people are losing faith in faith. They're losing really faith in community and patriotism. Coming from Gallup, the percentage of Americans who believe in 5 religious entities, those religious entities are God, angels, heaven, hell, and the devil, are down to new lows. Compared with 2001, belief in God and heaven is down the most, 16 points, while belief in hell has fallen 12 points, and the devil and angel are down 10 points. That's from, again, a new Gallup news poll. So even though the numbers are down, majorities still believe in those 5 entities. So here they are. 74% believe in God. 69% believe in angels. 67, heaven. 59, hell, and 58, the devil. Nearly 3 in 10 do not believe in hell or the devil. Belief greatest among frequent church-goers, Protestants, and Republicans. Democrats almost half as likely to believe in the devil. Just interesting Gallup numbers there. Not really sure what that says, but something to keep in mind because it's really a larger picture of, again, that loss of faith, in community, in patriotism. So it's just another troubling signal down that much from 2001. Okay. I wanted to start when it comes to breaking news on a odd story. But it's I say odd, but it's getting a lot more traction. This is something that's covered a lot lately. Lawmakers are demanding answers on UFOs. Senior lawmakers are increasingly demanding that military and other government officials provide them with information about intelligence on unidentified flying objects, or UFOs, as we are known to call it. The demands reflect frustration on the part of some lawmakers that they are being kept in the dark. The lawmakers do not necessarily believe the government is hiding signs of extraterrestrial life from the public, but they are frustrated. They are not learning more about unknown objects flying in restricted U.S. airspace. And it's become a common thing. It's not even deniable at this point. Now, whether or not you believe that is that UFO is from outer space or if it's from a enemy or from an ally, that's really up to you. But Marco Rubio is demanding answers, saying, "My primary interest in this topic is if there are objects operating over restricted airspace, it's not ours, and we don't know whose it is. That's a problem that we need to get to the bottom of." It's a good point. It really is a safety issue. Why is this happening so frequently? If there's an explanation for it that's being kept from Congress, then we need to force the issue. We're not getting answers. Again, that's Senator Rubio. The Senate has adopted an amendment to an annual defense bill that would require the federal government to collect and disclose all records related to UFOs, unless a special review board determines they must be kept classified. What do you think? Do you think they'll be determined that they need to keep them classified? That seems like the common way it would have been done in the past. The amendment was sponsored by Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and Senator Mike Rounds, a Republican from South Dakota, a member of the Senate Armed Services and Intelligence Committees, and is backed by Rubio and Senator Kristen Gillibrand, the chairwoman of the Armed Services Subcommittee on Emerging Threats, as well as Senator Todd Young, a former Marine intelligence officer, and Martin Heinrich. I just thought we'd start the program with that this morning. What do you think? Do you think the government is keeping us in the dark on UFOs? That's what these prominent politicians feel, and they are demanding answers. Let's take our first break. plenty to talk about this morning. Please don't be shy. Contact me at any time. That's either on today's topics or if you would like to send in questions for tomorrow's interview with Senator Tom O'Mara. So there you go. That's my contact information. And while I take that off the screen, you can always see the number on the bottom there by the little wave. And the wave counter is for those walking by on Market Street. Or running. If they wave, we add it to the count. I think our record is 5 or 6. I can't remember. I'll have to keep better track of that. Anyway, stay with us. We'll be right back. And frankly speaking, here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. Thank you for watching Frankly Speaking. I'm your host, Frank Acom. So we were talking earlier about that poll that found that people since 2001 they don't believe in God like they did back in 2001. And we've had the poll that says that people don't care about community or really have faith in faith. Tie these all in with a piece that Wall Street Journal columnist Dan Henninger wrote over the weekend. Public trust, let me put it up on the screen here. Public trust in the FBI has reached the red zone, and the U.S. is inching closer to mayhem, chaos, and anarchy. The United States is battling a crisis of confidence with U.S. governing institutions on the line, and FBI Director Christopher Wray's recent testimony before Congress may have been the last straw for the FBI. In a Wall Street Journal column titled "The FBI Loses the Public," Henninger examined the public's diminishing trust in institutions like the FBI, as studies show voter confidence in the Bureau and the DOJ has hit rock bottom. According to a new poll, NBC, they found the public's positive view of the FBI has tanked by 15% in the last 5 years. The poll came days before Wray's contentious hearing before Congress and amid calls for his resignation from GOP lawmakers over his leadership of the FBI. Quote, conservatives no longer trust the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Liberals, or more precisely progressives, no longer trust the local police. We have a problem, Henninger wrote. And that's an interesting point when talking about local police. You know, we do have, well, there you go, I'll keep my contact up for a second. This distrust by those on the left of local police, of police in general. We talk about it so frequently on this program, these attacks, unfounded attacks, very often on our local police departments. It's really troubling. It's caused an issue, as we've talked about in the past, of people signing up to become a member of law enforcement. But I'll continue. Confidence in U.S. institutions such as the FBI, Supreme Court, and Congress has been on a steady decline since 2017 and is now reaching record lows. More broadly, less than a third of voters trust the federal government. Less than a third of voters trust the federal government, a 20-year low. What's going on now is different. The U.S. is already amid a crisis of confidence in what we call our governing institutions. That word, governing, is taken for granted, but it took a long time for governing to become a fact of daily life. Consider the opposite of governing elsewhere: mayhem, chaos, and anarchy, he writes. With accusations of a politicized Department of Justice intensified by, among other things, the FBI raid on former President Trump's home, Americans are turning away from the institutions that, quote, provide the bedrock of domestic tranquility, Henninger argued. It's an interesting point. It does lead towards this kind of mayhem, this anarchy. And back to the point about distrust in the Supreme Court, Joe Biden received a letter from a professor. Oh, am I already? Yeah, I'm running late. Basically saying, just ignore the Supreme Court, which he is doing. He's doing end runs around, as we saw with the school loan bailout, doing end runs around the Supreme Court because the left does not like when the rules don't play to their advantage. And we, of course, follow the rules, and now we have a more conservative Supreme Court, and that makes Democrats upset. So what do? They just change the rules. Just, stack the Supreme Court or just go around it. Just ignore it. We're going to talk about that when we come back. Also, 5 things you must know about fighting Biden's radical censorship game. That's coming up right after this. Stay with us. And this is Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV, Big Fox. And we are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning, and we received a wave over our phone number. Someone texted me a wave, so we add that to it. That counts. Okay, this is the piece I mentioned right before we went to break. It's by Dan Schneider. 5 things you must know about fighting Biden's radical censorship game. President Joe Biden and several members of his administration have used the power of the federal government to systematically and illegally silence political opposition through, and I quote, a far-reaching and widespread censorship program or campaign, according to the federal district court judge Terry Doughty. Now, one of the things they said, because if you recall, many have called it Orwellian, Ministry of Truth is how the Biden administration operates. Doughty includes scores of examples, that's the judge, requiring 82 pages in the factual section alone to show how the Biden government, quote, colluded with and or coerced social media platforms to suppress disfavored speakers. Americans should be aware of the following 5 things as we battle this censorship industrial complex. Judge Doughty is no dummy. That's number 1. He was confirmed by the U.S. Senate in 2018 on a 98-0 vote. The judge is a good man who performed significant pro bono work to help youth break away from illicit drug use and has served as deacon of his church. Now, you remember, this came out on July 4th. It was kind of buried. We mentioned it a lot at the time, but I'll continue. The ACLU and today's liberals ain't what they used to be, according to this article. The American Civil Liberties Union has worked since 1920 to ensure that freedom of speech is protected for everyone. Indeed, over several decades, the ACLU has famously fought for the First Amendment. Missouri versus Biden is the most important First Amendment case this century, but the ACLU did not file a brief in support of free speech rights. Think about that. We know the ACLU has become just essentially a liberal organization. It's more about their politics than it is about the First Amendment at this point. Where did Mitch McConnell go? Is question number 3. Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell has long described himself as a First Amendment purist. I see political speech as a mother of all of our freedoms, but he has not uttered a peep about the Biden censorship industrial complex and has not defended Doughty against the attacks from legacy media and other liberal causes. Biden is even more radical than the social media companies. There's no longer a dispute about the political goals of big tech. And they made that pretty crystal clear just when you go back to the fact that they censored the laptop story that the New York Post released about Hunter Biden. That was a prime example right before the election. But Google's search engine is responsible for shifting millions of votes to the left. Mark Zuckerberg's $400 million in targeted donations to election officials had a huge impact as well, but the Biden administration has demonstrated repeatedly that it demands more from big tech than even they are willing to provide on their own. Doughty's decision lists 22 examples reflecting how Biden officials ultimately threatened and coerced social media platforms to force them to supercharge their censorship efforts. And finally, it's not just about the Constitution, it's about ethics. Missouri v. Biden is a case brought to rein in an abusive government, but it reveals a president who has also crossed clear rules of government ethics as well. According to the Justice Department, quote, an employee may not use his public office for his own private gain or for that of persons or organizations at which he is associated personally, end quote. In his July 4th decision blocking the Biden administration from continuing to operate as an Orwellian Ministry of Truth, Doughty includes scores of examples requiring 82 pages in the factual section alone, as I mentioned, to show that the Biden government colluded with and or coerced social media platforms to suppress disfavored speakers. So in conclusion, Biden's censorship regime goes well beyond colluding with and coercing social media companies to do his dirty work. The list of federal agencies actively involved in funding censorship efforts is growing constantly. So we tie that all in. Of course, with the election, we see what the censorship of that Hunter Biden story, but think of how much they went after people that had, and one person is a great example of this, that we mentioned Friday, RFK Jr. The censorship of him. They actually, at that hearing on censorship, attempted to censor RFK from speaking. So I bring this up to make you aware of the heavy-handedness of the left in making sure that you don't get platformed, that you will not have a platform to speak if they disagree with you. And this is just another prime example. And we go back to what I was mentioning earlier. How am I doing on time? I'm doing fine. Good. I just kind of glimpsed at this earlier on, but there's a professor who urged Biden to defy mistaken rulings by MAGA Supreme Court justices. So this is another part. We see that people are losing faith in law enforcement, in the FBI, in government institutions. We see this administration trying to censor you or censor people they disagree with. And now you actually have people encouraging the president to ignore another institution. Remember when we heard so much about destroying norms? Well, this is what President Biden is doing. He's destroying norms by ignoring Supreme Court rulings and do what he wants anyway. But President Biden should find ways to defy the rulings of MAGA justices for their gravely mistaken constitutional interpretations, said a university professor in a letter on Wednesday. Harvard law professor Mark Tushnet and San Francisco State University political scientist Aaron Belkin penned an open letter to the Biden administration on popular constitutionalism to respond to what Biden has called, quote, not a normal court following high-profile cases. Quote, this is from the letter. We urge President Biden to restrain MAGA justices immediately by announcing that if and when they issue rulings that are based on gravely mistaken interpretations of the Constitution that undermine our most fundamental commitments, the administration will be guided by its own constitutional interpretations. We have worked diligently over the past 5 years to advocate Supreme Court expansion as a necessary strategy for restoring democracy. So again, norms are meant to be destroyed if there's a D next to their name. Then it's okay. Then you don't hear about norms being destroyed or attacks on our institutions. You don't hear that. You actually see it encouraged if it's a liberal professor. Although we continue to support expansion, so they want to expand the Supreme Court because they did not get their way, the threat that MAGA justices pose is so extreme that reforms that do not require congressional approval are needed at this time. And advocates and experts should encourage President Biden to take immediate action to limit the damage. So in their mind, the damage. Now, George Washington University law professor and legal expert Jonathan Turley penned an op-ed for The Hill on Saturday that warned about this interpretation of the Constitution. What is most striking about these professors is how they continue to claim they are defenders of democracy, yet seek to use unilateral executive authority to defy the courts, and in cases like the tuition forgiveness and affirmative action, the majority of the public. They remain the privileged elite of academia, declaring their values as transcending both constitutional and democratic processes. Yeah, and that's a little bit of that mindset of, they've always been surrounded by yes people, students encourage them in this radicalism. They encourage radicalism. And now, since they're not getting their way, they're calling for the end to the norms, to the end to our institutions. Turley added, in other words, they are calling for Biden to declare himself the final arbiter of what the Constitution means and exercise unilateral executive power without congressional approval. He is to become a government unto himself. It's scary, and this is encouraged. I mean, these are, and there's a really good piece that kind of ties in with this. We're not going to have a chance to read it all. I think it's like 12 pages. But how college towns are decimating the GOP. And we've talked about the colleges, how kids, even if they are conservative, have to keep it quiet. They have to self-censor, or they'll be ostracized. They'll be a social pariah. They'll be attacked by not just students, fellow students, but perhaps their teachers, perhaps their professors or faculty. It just paints a larger picture of what we're dealing with here, folks, in 2023. So calling for Joe Biden to essentially be a government unto himself, as Jonathan Turley said, to be the judge, jury, and executioner, the final arbiter. That's what these professors want. Then they don't think about the potential of what if a Republican wins and wants that same attitude. Well, I know the media will always say if a Republican does something they don't like, that he's destroying the institutions. He's destroying our norms. In this case, destroying our institutions, destroying our norms are not only encouraged, they're celebrated. So let's take another short break. We've got a lot to cover. That's why I'm so glad that we have this full hour together, just you and I, to catch up on some of the things that we missed last week. Tomorrow on the program, we'll have State Senator Tom O'Mara. He'll be joining us, so you can get your questions into that number on the bottom of your screen if you have any questions for the senator. That is tomorrow, right around 7:10, 7:15. So stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. I'd like to thank M.A. Neal Financial Services for sponsoring our interview section. Today we do not have an interview, but I wanted to mention them anyway. Okay, I got this nice email over the weekend, and I want to bring it to you because it ties in with our next story. If you recall, on Friday I was bringing you, it was talking head after talking head calls using the term so-called whistleblowers with the IRS, or so-called this and so-called that. That same thing happened over the weekend with MSNBC host Ali Velshi. We're going to talk about that in just a moment, but let's go to that email first. I love your show. Well, thank you. Thanks for watching. The reason they say so-called allegations is because they're so-called journalists. I would agree with that. The definition of journalist is a person whose job is to collect news and write about it. Keep up the good work. You are a real journalist. They do neither. Well, thank you for that. They do neither. I think they're all members of Jim Carrey's Yes Men group. The Dems say do this, and their answer, yes, man. Yeah, there's always that, oops, wrong one. Look at that. That's fancy, though. There's always been that argument. Who is controlling the message? Is it Democrats giving it to the media and the media promoting that issue or censoring? Yeah, I think that's the order. But some people wonder if it's not the media starts the talking points and the Dems piggyback on it. So you can weigh in on that. But I mention it because MSNBC host Ali Velshi said Republican probes into so-called Biden crime family. And it's riddled with conspiracies. That's something the media is very good at. They'll say conspiracies. Then they don't have to cover it anymore. They did that with RFK Jr., and they continue to do that. As a matter of fact, over the weekend, if we have a chance, I'm going to get to it, but RFK Jr. said if I watched the news and I trusted them, I wouldn't vote for me either. They've lied about him so frequently. But yes, Ali Velshi, he was, I'm not sure what program specifically he was on, but he was on MSNBC. He said, if you thought a hearing with two IRS whistleblowers was going to be tame, you'd be wrong. The hearing quickly devolved when Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene displayed explicit photographs of Hunter Biden to the committee. This is the reality of the Republican investigation into the so-called Biden crime family, he added in air quotes. It's seemingly riddled with stunts and conspiracies. Well, I guess you could say that's a stunt. She was just highlighting what was on that laptop. And let's face it, many people don't know about the laptop still to this day, or about Hunter Biden and these charges. Velshi also attempted to shut down Republican allegations that then Vice President Joe Biden pressured Ukraine to fire its top prosecutor investigating Burisma because Hunter Biden was a member of the company's board. Velshi claimed that Biden pushed for the Ukraine prosecutor's firing because he was considered categorically corrupt, and that his firing at the time was the policy position of the U.S. and international community, a defense often invoked by Biden allies. So there's back to that person's point. Are they using Democrat talking points, or is Ali Velshi saying this is the direction you should be pushing the narrative? So-called. Now, Miranda Devine, who does such a fantastic job at the New York Post, and before we go, I want to bring this up. I'm not going to dive too deep into it because it's about 5-6 pages. But she has, there we go. Hunter Biden put then VP Dad, Vice President Dad, Joe Biden, on the phone with business associates at least 24 times, according to an ex-partner, Devin Archer. Well, Page isn't responding. Well, there you go. Hunter Biden would dial in his father, then Vice President Joe Biden, on speakerphone into meetings with his overseas business partners. According to testimony expected before Congress this week from Devin Archer, the first son's former best friend. Archer, 48 years old, is facing jail for his role in a $60 million bond fraud. He's scheduled to testify at the House Oversight Committee about meetings he witnessed that were attended by Joe Biden either in person or via speakerphone when Hunter would call his father and introduce him to foreign business partners or prospective investors. This is a quote. "We are looking forward very much to hearing from Devon Archer about all the times he has witnessed Joe Biden meeting with Hunter Biden's overseas business partners when he was vice president, including on speakerphone," says Representative James Comer, the committee chairman. This is going to get very interesting. Now, again, this is an example because, like Velshi or whatever his name is, said, riddled with conspiracies. So that's how they can keep this all quiet and not report on it. They did the same thing. Jake Tapper, who now says they're going to report on Hunter Biden, at the time said, no, this is just a conspiracy with this laptop. It doesn't seem to be real. That was a talking point that they were given by the Biden administration, by Biden supporters. Ignore it, and it'll go away. But we know that led, and many people said that they would have changed their vote if they knew about that story. But of course, going back to a topic that's been a common thread this whole morning, we have the censorship by big tech, by social media, keeping that laptop story buried because obviously it was coming up on election, and it did not reflect well on Joe Biden. And as it's unfolded, we've learned more and more, and that's why people believe that Hunter got such a as they call it, sweetheart deal, a sweetheart plea deal. And then you see, of course, time and time again, going after former President Trump. There's actually a very good piece on this. Trump's enemies pursue more and more indictments to ensure his 2024 nomination. Yeah, that's what I've said. Be careful what you wish for when they throw these things out. And I know I quote this often, but former Congressman Joe Sempolinski had a great point that, yeah, you may not like Donald Trump, but you really don't like the deep state. And that's going to be the mindset of a lot of people when they make their decision on who to pick for the nominee or who to vote for president. Do you like the government being this heavy-handed with what they deem their political enemies? So I'll open that question to you, but we have to take a short break. Again, here's my contact information. Feel free to reach out at any time. You can call, but if you do call, please leave a voicemail. I can't take it live on the air, but please leave a voicemail, and I can read that transcript and listen to it later. You can also text there or email, whatever is easiest for you. Love to hear from you. And as I said, on tomorrow's program, we will have State Senator Tom O'Mara on the program, so you can get your questions to him right there. All right, let's take that short break. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Thank you for watching Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom, and we're broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street. We were talking at the very beginning of the program where lawmakers are demanding answers on UFOs. I received a message from a viewer, and I think it is a good point, which is this an example of the government showing us something shiny? Look over here. Look what we're doing over here. Something that will be an attention grabber, like finding out about UFOs while they are doing something else troubling that they don't want us to know about or not pay attention to. I think that's a fair point. And just to quote, because I'm kind of paraphrasing there, to divert our attention to look at the shiny thing over here while they do something crazy. It's definitely a good point and something to take into consideration. So thank you for that. Hey, by the way, the Biden administration, this was released on Friday, and this is kind of an update from topics that we discuss so often on this program, New York-wise and federal-wide. Consumers will have to shovel out thousands of dollars more to install a heat pump water heater rather than a conventional storage water heater in order to fall in line with new standards released Friday by the Department of Energy. So hide your gas stove, hide your water heater. If the proposal is adopted by 2029, not that far away, all new electric water heaters must deploy heat pump technology, and all gas-fired ones will use condensing technology. The Department of Energy estimates that if finalized, the measure will save Americans approximately $198 billion and reduce 501 million metric tons of harmful carbon dioxide emission over 30 years. So now Representative Thomas Massie argued that this takes away consumer choice. Leave us alone, he said. I couldn't agree more. These products already exist in the free market. Consumer, yeah, that's a good point. If you want this more eco-friendly water heater, whatever, they're out there. Supply and demand. It's already on the market, the free market. Consumers should decide whether the upfront cost of a heat pump water heater is worth the possible long-term savings. In many cases, the monthly savings never make up for the upfront cost of the equipment. That's a good point. So, just mentioning that one quickly. So, right now, as we talk about the presidential race, we're talking about Biden and his heavy-handedness this morning. Right now, Republicans are, the big talk is the upcoming debate. 7 Republican presidential candidates have, as of Sunday, met the polling requirement to appear on the August debate stage, following new polling from Fox Business in Iowa and South Carolina. Former President Donald Trump, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, tech entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy, which he's interesting. Some polls have him at number 2 right now, kind of coming out of left field. Interesting. We'll talk about that in a second. Former Vice President Mike Pence, former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, and former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie have each reached 1% or higher in at least 2 qualifying national polls and 2 qualifying state polls from separate states, which is the requirement set out by the RNC. There's a couple other rules, such as fundraising as well. We'll get to that in just a second. Ramaswamy said the RNC's debate stage criteria, they're stringent but fair. If an outsider can clear the bar, politically experienced candidates should be able to do so as well. If you can't hit these metrics by late August, you have absolutely no chance of defeating Joe Biden in the general election. That's a very good point. Someone who's really struggling with it, Mike Pence, kind of interesting. And the part that he's struggling with is the donations. So it's nothing, it's not too difficult to get over 1% in the polls, but it is difficult to have those individual donors and hit that magic number. Pence is the only candidate who has met the polling threshold, but says he has not reached the fundraising threshold. We're making incredible progress toward that goal. We're not there yet, he said on State of the Union on CNN. Of the remaining GOP candidates who have not yet met the polling criteria, former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson is 1 national poll away from doing so. North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum needs 2 national polls, and former Texas Representative Will Hurd and Miami Mayor Francis Suarez each need 1 state and 2 national polls to qualify. No other candidate has hit 1% in a qualifying poll so far. Now, I know what you're saying. I didn't know some of these people were running either. Who was it that was handing out the $20 gift cards, which people still question whether or not it's legal, but hand out the $20 gift cards no matter how much you donated. So you could donate $1 to his campaign, because then he would hit that fundraising threshold to be on the debate stage. Of course, we still do not know if former President Donald Trump will participate in the first debates. He said recently that he was thinking or leaning against it, because his thought is why go in there with low tier when he's winning most polls by 30 percentage points? So why bother? I don't know. I guess the problem with that is if you don't show the whole debate, which is probably going to be the case anyway, it will be about Trump. But that also plays in his favor as well, getting all the attention without really having to attend. But I will say, then candidate Trump was very good at these debates, in demeaning his opponents and knocking. I remember specifically one example where Rand Paul gave a really good answer on something. I don't remember what it was, but it was a pretty clear answer, and probably would get him more support. And just to cut him off at the knees, then candidate Trump said, boy, looks like tonight's not your night, Rand. And it just took the air out of his sails. So I don't know. Do you think, I'll ask you the question, I think Donald Trump really likes those opportunities. And obviously he has not been, the media has not been giving him the platform like they used to. So will he skip the debate? The first one, maybe 2. We heard one of his former advisors say at least the first 2. It would be his speculation. So what do you think? Will he participate in the debate? Will he not? That's the big question. But right now we have to take a short break, so stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. We are back, and frankly speaking, here on WYDC TV Big Fox. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. I wanted to remind you, I brought this up on Friday's program, but this is for all of you commuting this morning, going into work or into, well, I guess not school. Robert Dan Drive from Liberty Drive to Victory Highway will be closed due to railroad construction. That begins today. There'll be no access for vehicles for pedestrians, from Victory Highway up to Sub. Well, you can read it all there. So keep that in mind if you are working out in that area, that you will have to change your plans or prepare and leave yourself a little more time. Okie doke. Let's get back to the program here before we have to take another short break. Trump over the weekend was raging at Biden and the FBI officials over his legal troubles, and that's how Mediaite reports it. He went on his Truth Social saying, and this was on Sunday, he called the legal issues a coordinated hoax, similar to investigations during his presidency about his ties to Russia in order to steal another election through prosecutorial misconduct at levels never seen before in the U.S. Deranged Jack Smith has already spent over $25 million. This again, former President Trump on Truth Social. Just think of it. Between Mueller, Deranged Jack Smith, and congressional committees, over $100 million have been spent investigating me since I came down the escalator at Trump Towers. Wow. Biden is a criminal, and almost no money by comparison has been spent investigating him. Good point. Get smart, Republicans. They are trying to steal the election from you. Merrick Garland, Deranged Jack Smith, and coordinating Democrat prosecutors in New York and Atlanta have become the campaign managers for the most corrupt and incompetent president in United States history, Joe Biden. Who would have thought this would happen in our once great country, Trump concluded. So we're going to talk about what Rich Lowry thinks about these indictments. When we come back, stay with us, just a short break. This is Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV, Big Fox. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. I mentioned this piece a little bit earlier on, Rich Lowry from the New York Post. He says Trump's enemies pursue more and more indictments to ensure his 2024 nomination. There's being fortunate in your enemies, and then there's having enemies who are helping you take the first step in your political comeback. Donald Trump and his adversaries want profoundly different things in the long run. Trump wants to be back in the White House. Democrats want him in an orange jumpsuit. Yet in the shorter term, they both are seeking the same thing. Trump as a Republican nominee, either so he can sweep to victory, Trump's view, or be beaten again and pay the price for his crimes, the Democrats' view. The serial indictments of Trump, even if it's not the primary purpose, advances this mutual interest. With every indictment, Trump dominates media attention and rallies Republicans to his side based on charges of selective prosecution. And that's a good point. That's something we mentioned on the program in the past, that it does attract more people to Trump. The routine is so predictable, Rich Lowry said, it's become boring. The first indictment of a former president had some novelty, but now it feels as commonplace as a pork chop on a stick at the Iowa State Fair. The pushback against the notion Trump's prosecutorial pursuers know they might as well be MAGA agents, if that it's too clever by half, that Trump has these legal vulnerabilities and is simply paying the price. No theories about underhanded political motivation are necessary. It's certainly true Trump has major exposure in the documents case, but the Alvin Bragg indictment is thin, and we don't know yet what special counsel Jack Smith has or what District Attorney Fannie Wills is working with at Fulton County. Yeah, it does really play into Trump's hands. It gets a lot of people to side with him because, like we keep saying, so you may not like Trump, but you probably don't like the deep state at all. So you add all of these attacks on him, and it just draws more people to him. Now, I don't think, and Lowry makes it sound like that's one of the goals. I don't agree with that in this. I do think they really want him destroyed. I don't think it's to help his campaign at all. But every time one of these indictments comes down, the polls increase for the former president. So you can find that piece. Oh my goodness, we're out of time. You can find that piece at the New York Post. Couple of last things we're going to wrap up after this break. Wow, we went fast this morning. So stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. We are wrapping things up here on Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV. Big Fox, I'm your host, Frank Acom. Don't forget, on the program tomorrow, and there's the number to reach out to me if you have any questions for State Senator Tom O'Mara. Tom O'Mara is going to join us tomorrow around 7:10, 7:15, so make sure you tune in. I would recommend starting right at 7. Just tune in. Okay, I mentioned this earlier. RFK said he was being interviewed on Sunday on Fox News' Sunday Morning Features. RFK Jr. said, if I believe the stuff that's written about me in the papers and reported about me on the mainstream news sites, I would definitely not vote for me. I would think I was a very despicable person, and that is how they've attacked RFK Jr. with everything they can throw at him. They do not like the thought that he did so well off the jump. But can you imagine Democrats trying to destroy a Kennedy? It's wild. I've been really, slammed in a way that I think is unprecedented. Even more than President Trump was slammed by the mainstream corporate media. I don't know if I agree with that last line. Maybe at first. No, I can't agree with that line. But I can understand what he's saying about the coverage. Also, on the New York side of things, quickly, I wanted to mention this to you. There's a bill out there that would ban public use of marijuana. This is a conversation that it seems like I've been having frequently. The idea that, let's say you and I were having a picnic and I opened wine to go with our picnic, we'd get picked up for open container instantly. But when you have people out smoking marijuana, which has obviously that very distinct smell, gets kind of overwhelming, that as of right now is legal. So you could walk down Market Street here with a joint and think of how it affects young people, how it affects people just trying to have a good time and maybe have their lunch out here on Centerway. So in New York State, most municipalities ban the use of alcohol in public streets or outside the venues they specifically allow it. Yet the state's relatively new marijuana law doesn't let local governments impose the same restrictions on public consumption of THC. New York State Senator George Borrello wants to change that with legislation that would prohibit public use of marijuana in all forms, unless specifically authorized by the locality. So a locality can opt in to allow this. He calls it a public safety issue, but it's not about the dangers of secondhand smoke. I'm trying to enact an open container law for marijuana, said Borrello. Not just to ban smoking it, but vaping, edibles, anything in public places. Borrello, who's in the Jamestown area, introduced Senate Bill 7604 last week, and is co-sponsored in the State Assembly by Michael Novahov of Brooklyn. The bill would impose a $125 fine for consuming marijuana in public and allow municipalities to both enforce a state law and impose their own laws regarding public use of marijuana. Currently, New York's law makes it illegal to smoke cannabis. Any place tobacco smoking is prohibited, but the fine is only $25, which neither deters violators nor encourages enforcement. That's a good point coming from Borrello. You can't walk down the street chugging a bottle of vodka, but you can get stoned in public, and that is just reckless, he said. Borrello said many states that have legalized cannabis restrict consumption to private residents, including California and New York City. Recently launched a campaign reminding people about non-smoking laws. Just want to mention that to you. We are out of time for today's edition of Frankly Speaking. Senator Tom O'Mara on the program tomorrow. I hope that you will join us. Thank you for everybody that reached out, contacted me. We'll be back tomorrow morning starting at 7 a.m. with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, have a great day, everyone.